one more thought on the state of the states.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you at part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
That's probably not true. There's ample time to talk about the state of the state. But in formality, of course, each year, just like the State of the Union, the state of Rhode Island visits the state of the state via the prism that the governor looks through. And Governor Raimondo had her State of the State about, 10 days ago now. Welcome in to this Friday evening program. Our Lieutenant Governor, Dan McKee, who stood and applauded a number of initiatives from the governor, is here. We are a little bit late on production tonight, so we're just going to have a good old-fashioned coffee clatch here with Dan McKee. It's not a problem, you know, full disclosure. He and I have been buddies for a long time. We play a little golf together, and this will be just like a round of golf, where after the fourth hole, I say, please stop talking policy. Could you just hit the ball? Here's the headline. State of the state. Raimondo pushes for more housing, better education. Well, okay. Education is your bailiwick. That is something that you have been a real success story on when it comes to public service. And it's usually what, about the 6th, 7th hole that we're in, where you finally exhaust yourself of all your new education. I have to rely on the front
Once you
nine.
get up on me like 2 or 3 holes, Dan, I kind of have to interrupt you and break your flow.
Every once in a while.
Yeah.
But being a pal doesn't mean you get off. I mean, you and I have had some good run-ins on issues, good fair fights, and I think there might be a little bit of that tonight. I'm not sure, but what was your, before we get into some of the specific things that you're doing on education and the state of education, what was your overall take about the state of the state, and where are we?
Well, I think that it was a number of aspirations, and I don't know whether we are going to really be able to balance it in terms of a budget. So I think that the budget is the overall issue right now, the one that I'm really digging into.
We're a couple $100 million in the hole, reportedly.
Yeah, and
we're always couple $100 million in the hole, reportedly.
And we're filling it with not necessarily real strong, revenue. So there's a lot of gimmicks in there, right?
Meaning even the legalization of marijuana, that the governor. So the governor didn't mention marijuana at all in the state of the state. That's its own unique fight going on between the General Assembly and the governor's office, and we can talk about that a little bit. But then I think in reaction to and kind of a take that on the medical marijuana fight that we've been having here, she throws up the idea that maybe we ought to replicate New Hampshire liquor stores with Rhode Island pot stores. And she blames law enforcement for pushing her to that idea inside the conversation of legalizing, meaning if we're going to legalize, let's own it. I can't find a cop, all due respect to law enforcement, who will say, yeah, we did it. The state police superintendent says, I need more resources for better enforcement on the street. Well, who can argue with that?
Yep.
Rhode Island Association of Police Chiefs, no comment. So I don't know what she's talking about. Is that what you're talking about? Because she put $20 million in the back end of the next fiscal year budget for that, which nobody sees happening.
Yeah, that's part of the gimmick, right? Because we know that that's not going to get traction in the General Assembly. I think that the leadership on both sides, right, Senate and House, signaled that. But I think that they also are signaling let's bring it to a debate. Let's bring it to potentially even a vote. In a general election. So.
Meaning a referendum on marijuana.
I think that's what I'm hearing from the leadership on both sides. They want to, they don't want it to be a mandate from the governor's office. They want to have a real thorough look at it and provide the opportunity for full vetting of the issue.
Well, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President tell us that they don't want to see the legalization of marijuana on a recreational basis. And I'd like to take that at face value, but the stunt that they're pulling in adding 6 compassion centers, meaning the medical marijuana facilities, and allowing those facilities to grow just like the 3 existing can, putting the cultivators who supply the 3 existing facilities out of business, because if everybody can grow, there'll be an abundance of pot. None of it makes sense. It's not an organized strategy, and it feels to me like it's a prep and a foundational move for investors who may be known to government to be in place and take advantage of the opportunity, not only for medical marijuana sales, but the eventual recreational marijuana sales.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going to lead, but I did follow some of the conversations that you had on the radio with current business owners
I mean,
who have made investments.
nothing else makes sense other than setting them up for the future profits.
So we're very supportive of all the small businesses, right? So if people have made
That's your big theme.
Yeah, if people invested in the state of Rhode Island and are employing, we should be doing everything we can to maintain their businesses and help their businesses grow.
So you're talking about the cultivators, some
Sure.
of whom are flimsy, just not producing a lot. There's 51 of them in the state, but some are multi-million-dollar business operations.
Yeah, and we should
Small
be
business, but significant investments.
hopefully, and maybe that's part of the overall discussion that needs to have. That I've heard the speaker say that he wants to have this vetted and on the House floor, rather than being put in as an amendment to the budget. But going back to your original premise, yeah, that money, we know that money. It didn't matter whether it was a marijuana money or whether it was some other money. We know that's a gimmick to balance the budget, right? In terms of the way that the budget was balanced. So that $20 million plus is not going to be a reality yet. We put it in the budget.
So
as a
let me be
reality.
clear. I mean, I'm not trying to create a food fight here, but let me be clear. You're saying that the governor has provided gimmicks. She sets the budget up. She's putting in gimmicks, and that bothers you.
In that case, it is, yes. I think.
What are the other gimmicks?
Well, I think that they're not necessarily. Gimmicks is probably they're valid revenue sources potentially, right? But knowing that it's not going to be a revenue source in this fiscal year, and you put it in as a dollar item. I guess it puts the monkey on the back of the General
She
Assembly.
seems to like to do that. She did it with sports betting. We weren't up and running, and she put sports betting in. She's done it with tolls.
That's right.
We're 50 million short on tolls.
50 million short on tolls, but I would also say that we've been very fortunate that we've been able to fill that hole.
Which is why we don't need any tolls.
With dollars that we didn't realize that we're going to be there, but so thank goodness for Jack Reed and others that we've been able to fill that hole.
But don't you agree with me that with 6 of the proposed 13 or 14 gantries up right now, and construction and steel availability delays and all that kind of stuff, that wouldn't it be smart, and a lawsuit right now that could go either way, isn't it time to just take a breather on this thing and realize that at best, even if all those monies on tolling were projected to have come in accurately, it was 10% of the road works project anyway. We can't be fiscally austere to find the kind of money necessary to rebuild the bridges without putting the economy at risk with truck tolls that eventually will end up tolling the cars you and I drive.
Well, you need a revenue source, Dan. Because it's not as easy as just saying, all right, we're going to take those dollars from here.
We raised $4.5 billion worth of revenue in this state.
I know, but that's an argument that is, somewhat faulty. Look, if you're going to take money from a particular area, and I've done this on a smaller scale in the town of Cumberland, and we've had the debates in Cumberland. If you're going to take money from a certain line item and apply it to a line item that you want to cover, then you are going to be short on revenue unless you actually put unless you actually compensate on the expense side. So it is a little more complicated than just saying, oh, we got a lot of money and we should be able to allocate
You think
that
we
way.
should fix that? We should finish this toll project.
I am on board with the roadworks. I think it's a really good thing.
We need infrastructure improvement.
Infrastructure
of course.
continually comes up on one of the negatives that we carry as a state of Rhode Island. So that project is something that we really should support. I would still be interested in seeing the discussion with the players, which is Chris Maxwell and truckers, in terms of what other resources could they put on the table right now as well. But I think you need to be careful with the projections, and we go back to the gimmicks. If you're projecting a certain amount of money,
yeah,
it doesn't matter what the source of the money is.
So clarify
but if it doesn't come through, then.
But clarify for me. Is the toll project a gimmick?
No. The putting the dollars, and we're just talking specifically about the budget. that you're asked about, and the structural deficit.
Well, the tolls provide money for spending in the budget,
It does.
and they're way short.
That's correct. And so what I'm saying, the projections of that revenue on the marijuana, or the projections on the tolls, or the projections in terms of we're selling property to fill holes in the state of Rhode Island right now, those are all things that we should be concerned about.
If you were the sitting governor, would you be gung-ho to finish the toll project and get them all up?
If that was the only source of revenue,
You could be the sitting governor. Gina Raimondo gets
So
bored, and she looks pretty bored to me. I think you could be the
if
sitting
that
governor.
was the only source of revenue, yes. If there's other ways that you could, I'm still concerned about the businesses that are in Rhode Island that potentially could be impacted. I'm not as concerned as the businesses that are outside of Rhode Island on that issue. And also, I think you need to take a look at the balance that we're providing. Right, when we're taking away all the vehicle taxes, that's saving those businesses money. And I would be very interested in seeing what's the offset in terms of the tolling. Is it a positive or a negative in that basis?
Listen, I hate the vehicle tax, but it is laugh out loud funny how the vehicle tax reduction came. Nick Mattiello in 2016 needed a gimmick in election. I was there the day it was presented to him. He threw it out at a press conference, and it stuck. Of course, Gina Raimondo keeps trying to steal. The governor keeps trying to steal the idea and then de-escalate the idea. And he's like, I'm going to be here until the end of this car tax reduction, as if it was his mission in life, when I know it was a Hail Mary pass in 2016 in his re-election bid. So,
yeah, and it supports your premise that you can actually find money somewhere, right? Because that money that's going to go to about $220 million that wasn't laid into the budget.
I don't know why we just don't copy Massachusetts. Even out the rate, right? Even out the rate. Do a property tax reform across the board. Copy the Commonwealth and live for another day.
Yeah, well, right now the people are appreciating that reduction in that bill. It doesn't matter whether they're getting less than what they deserve, because some communities are getting compensated more tax relief than other tax.
I'll tell you, in a tougher economy, the local towns are going to be like, croaking for money again, and here we go. It's the same. I'm not sure it's satisfied everybody. I know short term people say, oh God, I don't have to pay taxes on my car anymore. But there's other problems that come from knee-jerk policy. That's the point.
What it showed me is, look, just like the tax reform in 2017, there's certain people that are benefiting far more from that tax relief, but there's still people who are benefiting, and that really all they care is that they benefit. On the tax
You're
thing,
talking about the Trump. You're
the
talking
Trump
about
thing,
federally, yes.
on the car tax, when certain communities are getting compensated 100%, 200% more than other taxpayers across community lines. But right now, people love it, and so that's one of the reasons that it's going forward, right?
Okay, when we come back, this education thing is no small matter. Stay with us. So, it's almost ridiculous for me to say quickly your thoughts on education, because that's asking you about education, and for a quick answer is the chances of that, like me shooting 65 on the opening round of spring 2020. That's not going to happen. So
no, but I can tell you my weigh in on the governor's.
There's some serious stuff going on out there. There's the pre-K development, of course. There's the Providence School takeover. There's your thoughts on Central Falls, and then there's this thing you're doing, parading around the state, trying to get consensus for. Why don't you talk about that? Because you're visiting communities, asking them to think differently about education.
Yes, the shift that needs to be made is not just think about re-engineering or reinventing or reforming public education just in the time frame that the kids are in schools. You need to figure out and empower the community in a way where education becomes a priority.
And you did this.
That's what I did in Cumberland. And so what we're seeing is quickly the benefits that Cumberland is receiving now are being recognized around the state.
People don't know what you're talking about. You set up an office. Explain.
We set up an office for education, an office for children and learning. We've been running.
You called it a municipal children and learning office.
Yes, that's correct.
It was over by the
office.
Library.
That's correct.
People went in and they did what?
Kids were taught how to read, do math, do music, do art from ages from 4 years old
And
to
it was
high
paid
school.
for how?
We did it through a municipal line in the budget. Got an ordinance passed in the town of Cumberland, and that's what we're asking.
And the educators in Cumberland were miffed at the beginning.
Still are.
Still are.
Still are. I mean, there's still people who will push back against it.
And then you went and championed charter schools.
But
and the mayor academy.
Yeah, on that, the point that I'm making on that one is we've been running a pre-K program in the town of Cumberland for 12 years. And our schools have gone from the bottom part of the top 20 into the top 10 we've had thousands of kids
Well,
go through that.
what
So
I was
there's a
going to
benefit
say
to that.
is to help the conversation along is you did the Office of Children and Learning, you championed the mayoral academies, you were, I wouldn't say hung in effigy, right? But they were really upset with you in town. You were still popular, except that one bad election that you had.
They have to bring that up.
Well, you shanked one. But the point here is you put pressure on the education system, and to the credit of the education system, the school board, the hired guns, the superintendents, the teachers, everybody, they performed under that pressure. They might have been mad about it, but they performed
They
well.
performed, and the kids got the benefit of. My whole thought was to change the way that we provide, education to our kids in town and our district schools, and that happened. But you know another sidebar of that, Dan? All the success Cumberland has had, and my efforts to improve education, my efforts to improve the per capita income in the town, my efforts to improve real estate values in the town, that all happened, right? And now we have the results. And now our town is going to get potentially penalized by almost $1 million of education funding that's going to be removed.
Because you don't need it anymore?
Well, because they think we have the tax capacity, or the formula kind of sets it up in such a way. Instead of rewarding that behavior, right now we have to really argue that point, that we need to reward behaviors of communities that are actually making progress on education and not giving it fake hustle.
In the meantime, you're knocking on doors, Middletown, other places where Coventry, right? You've been visiting communities to encourage them to take up the same model you did in Cumberland.
Yeah, open up in a municipal education office. It's a blank sheet of paper. You can personalize it to the needs of your community, and you can do it at significantly less cost.
You getting good feedback?
Yeah, we're getting some good feedback. It'll be interesting to see who wants to tackle the issue. I've been told that I was unusual to set up an office like that. It's the only one in the country that actually we can find that actually puts municipal leadership involved with educating kids, and the relationship that you develop with the parents is significantly different. And then the fact that you made it a priority in the community from the municipal office, that sets the tone, right? All of a sudden, education is a very important issue in the town of Cumberland. Priority on both the municipal side and the school side. When you do that, it's a game changer. And so that's what we're going to be asking other municipalities to do: pass a resolution, pass a statute, set up the office, bring in educators, educate the kids. Imagine if you're living in a community with a language immersion problem. Yeah, focus all the time on that, 52 weeks out of the year, helping young kids to learn English. What a benefit that will be in the classroom, because that's a lot of the problem that we're having in the testing, right? The kids just don't understand the test. They don't understand the language. So
it's an entrepreneurial way for communities to take their own education future into their own hands.
And what I say is, let's incentivize that on the state level.
And not penalize it.
And not penalize communities that are actually enhancing education, public education. We should be supporting it.
Because the status quo union, labor, and even the boards of education, who are chock full of a lot of small minds. Thank God most boards have at least one smart cookie on them. There's not a lot of brain power going on there, and it's about territory, man.
It is, but remember, in the Office for Children and Learning, the education office I opened up, I didn't need any permission from the school department. If you had their cooperation and collaboration, that would even be better.
But I'm saying those forces are going to affect how the state determines its aid formula, and the penalty that you're talking about, a la Cumberland, is all from that kind of pressure on the back end.
Yeah.
So, but change is not easy.
I made Cumberland a very good example of what you can do if you actually got the will to do it.
No doubt. A couple of current issues when we come back. Stay with us.
The Auditor General shall have the power, when requested by a majority of the committee, to make post audits and performance audits of accounts and records of any other public body based on that law. I would make a motion that we not comply with this audit request from the Auditor General until there is a majority vote of the Joint Committee on Legislative Services.
That's George Nee, who heads up the AFL-CIO in the state, sits on the board of the Convention Center Authority. Have you been following this? Now, we taped this show yesterday afternoon. This is Friday night, and invariably there'll be developments on it. But as we tape the show, Speaker Mattiello has withdrawn his directive to the Auditor General, who works on behalf of the General Assembly, to audit the Convention Authority because of a lawsuit that has been filed and argued by the Minority Leader, Blake Filippi, who called out the Speaker for doing this without the authorization of the full body of the 5-member JCLS on which both of them sit. The allegation has been that the Speaker asked for the audit based on a personnel problem at the Convention Center for one of his buddies. Big problem.
Well, it sounds like, I think George spelled it out very clearly. You need a vote to have this, this audit done.
Ironically,
Certainly not against an audit. I don't know anybody would be against an audit of a quasi government area that we fund to millions of dollars a year.
yeah, well, I'll tell you, the ironic thing about it is that Republicans have been begging for an audit for years and years. The Democrats in the state haven't done an audit. Now the Speaker orders an audit. The Democratic Speaker orders an audit. For what reason? I don't know. And Republicans are now suing to stop the audit because legitimately the audit wasn't ordered correctly.
Well, we'll see how they vote when it actually gets put in front of the committee, right? I think this will definitely get in front of the committee for a vote.
Well, they'll probably have to vote for the audit because
Yes.
they've been asking for the audit the
Yes.
entire time.
So I think do the process correctly. I think that it sounds like the Speaker's office has determined that it's going to be better to go back to the committee and
Listen,
hopefully
I don't want to inflame the Speaker, but it feels a little Trumpian in the Ukraine situation in a way. The act never bore out, but he might have been playing footloose and fancy-free with his own power to order an audit. Right thing, wrong reason, right?
Well, the one difference between the Trump issue and the Speaker is that he's corrected it and he's gone back and he's removed the order. And
Trump
now
sent the money,
Yeah,
right? Just saying.
yeah. But so the answer is yes. I'm kind of aware of it. Probably you're a little more aware than I am. But I've got information that says that that the process needed to be corrected. It's on that way, and the politics are going to unfold, right, Dan? I mean, this is as much about politics as anything else.
I got
right
30
now.
seconds on your ambassador program. Update me. I know it's hard to do that in 30 seconds.
Yeah,
but tell me.
we're looking to identify citizens of Rhode Island that have networks outside of the country, and we want to credential them up to be ambassadors for Rhode Island. We've already had somebody go to Mexico on our behalf. Residents, volunteers,
non-compensated.
Non-compensated. We had a great meeting yesterday. We've gone to Mexico. We got somebody headed to Vietnam this week.
Meaning, if someone's traveling anyway, might as well be an ambassador
yes,
for Rhode Island.
they should go to our website. There's a very simple form. If you have networks out there that you live in Rhode Island, you have networks in other countries, and you visit them, you could be a big asset to the state of Rhode Island if you wanted to volunteer for this International Economic Ambassador Program.
In 10 seconds, the net benefit would be?
The net benefit to the state is we've already starting to see it, that we're inviting people back to Rhode Island, and hopefully they're going to invest in Rhode Island. We're working on a multiple wedding strategy right now that might come from China into our resort areas that's going to bring revenue and income for us.
Well, there you go. All right. Thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Final word when we come back. All right, so we record this program on Thursday, so I don't know what's happening. My guess is 50-50 that the Republicans will take a break for tomorrow on impeachment, because I don't think they got 3 days worth of work in defending the president like the Democrats had 3 days worth of accusing the president. Next week is all about witnesses and records. Want them or not, and how it impacts not only the decision on Trump, but the election in the fall. See ya.